Hello and welcome back to Coast FC, the Canadian soccer podcast focused on all things CPL, Canadian Championship, and more. My name is Felipe Ojejo, and unfortunately we do not have Mike in today, but do not fret, I have some lovely guests with me. We have the returning Wonder Kid, the young prodigy of Canada Soccer Daily, Thomas Hewitt. How are you doing, Thomas?
I'm doing good, thanks. It's been a little while since we all recorded together, and I'm really excited for this one.
Yeah, it's been a hot minute. We've all been busy with our own projects. Maybe nobody more than our next guest, Josh Healey, hot off his one soccer debut, the Tom Bogert of Canadian Premier League himself. How are you doing, Josh?
You flatter me, sir. You flatter me, and yeah, as you mentioned, doing pretty good today. First one out, so hopefully it's the first of many.
Yeah, no, it was a great little piece that you wrote there, and for those who didn't know, obviously One Soccer is doing a whole thing about creator spotlight to allow both journalists and fans to be able to write pieces and get paid for their work and to get exposure as well as pay, which is awesome. Not exposure as pay. So if you are interested in, if you are a journalist and you like to write about the Canadian Premier League or you want to start writing for it, I think it's a great initiative and you get paid and rewarded for it. But today we're not going to be talking about other creators. We're going to be talking about the teams themselves. We're going to talking about some season predictions. That's what today's episode is going to be about, the 2024 CPL season predictions. But before we dive into it, remember as always to follow us on all of our socials at Coast to Coast FC, and as well as on YouTube now that we have our visuals. Remember that we are also with Canadian Soccer Daily, as Thomas is. So we're going to have hopefully some clips up there soon. And now that we're making some reels, you might have seen our first reel yesterday. It took me about 4 hours to edit and everything. Hopefully I find a way to streamline that a little bit more next time. But we covered a little bit of news, and that's actually what we're going to talk about now, right before we get into the season predictions. It's been a little while since we've recorded, and a lot has happened in the CPL sphere since then. So I'm going to run us through some of the biggest things that have occurred throughout the CPL in terms of transfers. And then at the end, we'll hear a little bit from Thomas and Josh about their thoughts on it before moving on to the actual predictions. So first up is Josh's very own Halifax Wanderers. They've made two signings. The first one is Remy Aginbiade. Is that how you pronounce it, Josh?
Never said it out loud before in my life, but
Okay,
that sounds pretty good to me.
We'll run it. We'll run it as Aginbiade to a developmental contract, and also they brought back Aiden Ruchenas. Forge have acquired another young player themselves in Matteo Schiavoni on loan from CF Montreal. Pacific have signed the Canadian under-20 fullback Christian Greco-Taylor, as well as 17-year-old youth developmental contract Semi Kashavars. I think it's Kashavars. I think it is. I'm realizing now I should have tested saying these names beforehand, not saying them for the first time on the recording. But we move. Valor FC have re-signed Raphael Owen. After it's a great little story there as well. Just quickly, he has had a bunch of injuries. He made a few appearances before having a season-ending injury. He was on loan in developmental areas, and he's finally come back to be able to represent Valor. It's a great story for Raphael. Cavalry have signed Malcolm Shaw after he left Ottawa. Vancouver FC have signed Nico Giansopoulos. That was announced today at the time of recording. I actually found out yesterday at the Vancouver FC season launch event. Thomas, you're shaking your head, and understandably so.
Yeah,
I'm sure you'll want to talk about that in a little bit. And then Ottawa have signed Zachary Roy, and I think that's the only major signing that they've made in the last 2 weeks. I can't think of another name. Maybe. They've signed Amir Didic from Pacific FC in one of the biggest moves in CPL history, potentially, especially given everything that they've done so far. Feels like it was the cherry on top of a massive recruitment. That was the basis of the reel that we recorded as well, if you want to go and check that one out. But some huge moves throughout the sphere. Only one team hasn't actually made a signing since the last time we recorded, but they have lost a major player, and that is York United. Thomas, obviously a little bit rough there losing Nico. I know how much he meant to the fans there. What were your thoughts on maybe that one and some of the other moves that I mentioned there?
Well, first and foremost about Nico, I think that if anything, I am happy for him that he is getting a stay in the CPL. There are the rumors that maybe there was an offer from Finland on the table, but I'm very happy that he's got some familiar faces like Paris G in Vancouver, um, and it should be good for him. It's a good move for him. He'll probably be the backup to Callum Irving for most of the season, but as long as he can get minutes in Canada, I think that's really the best case scenario for him. It's unideal that he didn't, extend here, and as far as I know, that was kind of out of his control. And especially with a third goalkeeper slot open to CPL teams, it would have been nice to see him stay in York. But overall, it does seem that Vincenzini and Humeras is going to be a nice 1-2 pairing. But still, Nico is what he really is all about, is like what he meant to the fans, the interaction that he had with the fans. For the media, he was always generous with his time. So Vancouver really have inherited a great player in person. I couldn't be happier for him that he gets to stay in Canada, and I can't wait to see him back in York. Is really all I'll say, because he definitely deserves a contract. He's a very good player on and off the field, obviously, and on the field, yeah, great goalie. He's tall, commanding presence. He was a captain for York a lot last season, so that definitely kind of adds to his repertoire a bit. Yeah, great reaction time overall. Vancouver's getting a great one.
Yeah, no, couldn't have said it better myself. Indeed, Nico has been a stalwart of the league, a fantastic goalkeeper, and hopefully, yeah, we see him fighting for minutes with Callum Irving. Heard him a little bit yesterday talking about the environment and the competition there. Hopefully, it brings both of them and the entire team to some new heights. But Josh, a lot of young players being signed in the last couple of weeks, including for your own team, Halifax Wanderers. How have you seen some of these moves for yourself? I know that you're someone that likes to take interest in these transfer rumors and transfer moves.
Just as it pertains to the Wanderers.
It could be Wanderers, or it could be to any of them. It could be to, I know, Forge signed a young player, Pacific signed a young player, any and all.
Yeah, for sure. Well, as anyone who follows my work probably knows, April 1st was the cap compliance deadline for the player salary cap. Of course, everyone cleared, which isn't necessarily a surprise, and it really speaks to how clubs, there are different tiers in terms of some are spending to the tippy top of the cap, and I think we can all speculate who that is, and then other clubs again, might be closer to the salary cap floor. One of the initiatives that the league put in this year is expanding the roster, the developmental roster, up to 32 players. So the last little bit, this week in particular, we've seen a lot of clubs take advantage of that. Whether it be for Halifax again with Remy Agunbiad, again, hard to say. But of course, Aiden Rushness is a young player as well. You saw Pacific sign Sammy Kershavarts. Again, not sure if I'm saying that correctly, but I expect we'll see a couple more of these smaller contracts trickle out over the next couple of days. Again, some of these, are not surprises. For example, the fact that Aiden Rushness is coming back to the Wanderers. He didn't get a start for Halifax last year, but by everyone I've spoken to, he's held in very high regard as a keeper, but also as a teammate. So to see him get that contract after sticking it out and training with the club for the last number of years is just great to see. Honestly, it's the CPL in motion, right? We're seeing young players sign with clubs or be drafted by clubs and then slowly develop. So,
Yeah, and especially with the new ways to have young players in, draft picks in as well. The little rule changes that they have hopefully makes it that they have more of these young players feature, and it's not just for the under 21 minutes, but actually because they have the time and they have the skill and they have the ability and warrant playing time with the team. And that's what the CPL is all about. Growing and cultivating Canadian talent. So hopefully we see some of these players that have come into the CPL have success. Thomas, yeah, I just saw we're having a little private chat here in the recording, and apparently, breaking news, Meyer Bevan isn't with Calvary to start the season due to personal reasons. Thanks for catching that, Thomas. That could be huge ramifications for Calvary, given that Meyer Bevan was a top goal scorer for Calvary last season. That's if he isn't part of the picture for Calvary in the coming season for whatever it may be. We don't want to speculate too much, but that could change some of the season predictions that we're going to have. So maybe maybe a couple of last minute changes.
That's from Todd Salehoff at the Calgary Herald, by the way. So Bevan's still home in New Zealand and hasn't been with the team since CONCACAF.
Wow. Okay. Well, there you go, folks. Breaking news as we're recording. So yeah, we'll see how that affects Cavalry, and we'll see how that affects some of our own predictions. Because now, moving on from the news, we're going to go into 10 categories of season predictions. We are going to try to predict the unpredictable. We're going to try to hack the matrix, dive into that mainframe, and try to picture what the final moments of a game will be, what the final moments of the CPL final, the season finale, the award ceremony themselves. We're gonna try to guess some of the awards that are going to come at the very end of the season, and a couple of other things as well. As we have 10 categories, as I mentioned, we're going to go one by one through them, and we're going to start off with maybe one of the biggest ones of them all, which is the regular season champs. So the ones that will lift the North Star Shield. Now, this is one of the toughest ones. And after thinking of it long and hard, I've kind of realized that there are two options. You either go for one of the more obvious picks, or maybe you try to go for one of the more niche hipster picks. Because I think we can all agree the obvious picks right now are Cavalry, given that the fact that they won it last year, and Ottawa, given how strong their squad looks on paper being the operative word, because of all of the signings that they've made. So I'm curious to see if you guys have gone from one of the obvious picks, or if one of you guys have gone for a niche rogue pick. But starting with myself in this category, I am not going to try to be the niche rogue one in the group. I'm going to go for an obvious one. And I'm actually going to go for Cavalry to do the repeat there. I think the biggest difference with Ottawa and Cavalry, I do think those are probably the top two. But the biggest difference between those two sides is one has more stability because the group has barely changed for Cavalry. They know what it's like to work under Tommy Willen Jr. Like that whole environment, it has that experience within that group, not just in the individual players, but in the relationships. And I think that is going to be huge for them because while Ottawa have some fantastic players, it's going to be interesting to see how they fit together, what connections that they can make. Can Carlos Gonzalez get the best out of them right off the start, or are there going to be some growing pains as all of the players learn to play together? That's sort of my rationale of why I would give it to Cavalry over Ottawa, but I do think it's probably going to come between those two. Thomas, I'll go with you next. Did you go with one of the obvious picks here, or did you have a rogue shout?
I'll be honest, I wish I could say a rogue shout, but I think the Shield's staying in Calgary. Again, I hate to be boring with one of the obvious picks and then say Cavalry right after Felipe said Cavalry, but I think this team is just too strong to give it up. It knows how to perform over 28 games, and I feel like Ottawa, at least at one point this season, will struggle with some inconsistencies. That starting 11 is going to be really tough to pick week in, week out for Carlos Gonzalez. I also think that Cavalry's depth is a bit stronger. You see the Meyer Bevan news that we were just talking briefly about, but they have Malcolm Shaw now. He's proven himself in the CPL. They've got Toby Wojciechowski, who's one of the most entertaining players in the league that can also play in that number 9 position, as we saw in CONCACAF. Having CONCACAF fixtures under their belt, I think, is also important. And maybe that can, light a fire under them after what was a pretty rough 2-game series. I think this team, top to bottom, retaining Dan Klomp, Ali Musi, just had an amazing offseason. Lucas Diaz on loan is such an amazing move for many reasons. Diego Gutierrez didn't even start either of the CONCACAF fixtures, but he's, one of the best midfielders in the CPL. And I just feel like Cavalry's depth is kind of, it's more, I guess you would say, maybe practical than Ottawa's. It all makes sense. I feel like that roster is built in a very strategic way, and I'm not saying Ottawa's isn't, but I'm saying when you have all these stars together, things might get tricky. So that's my reasoning. I think Cavalry can have even a better season than they did last year, just because now they have that trophy with them, and they're going to be very keen to defend it.
Yeah, very true. I mean, you mentioned there Diego Gutierrez as somebody who doesn't even start, and is, for me, he was my underrated player of the season last year. And just to have that quality off the bench, and somebody who has been there a little bit longer than some of the other stars from Ottawa, I think highlight what you're saying there. Josh, for yourself, same question. I'm curious to see if you went for one of the obvious picks or if you went for a more niche rogue pick. The floor is yours.
Yeah, and good points by both of you guys. I actually, if you read my One Soccer piece, had the chance to talk to Tommy Wilden Jr. on Wednesday, and talk about a motivated guy, right? He's hosted one trophy, and he's gunning for more. He made made it certain that everybody knew that they're coming again, not only to win the regular season, but also to have their chance for the North Star Cup as well. Obviously, they lost to Forge last year in what was just a fantastic game at Tim Hortons Field. But I'm not going to go that way. I'm going to go for the club that I cover day in, day out, and that's going to be the Halifax Wanderers.
Love that.
I think they've snuck under the radar a little bit because, maybe they didn't have some of the splashier signings a la Atletico Ottawa. But, it's important to recognize that they kept the core of last year's club together. And once they figured it out after the first 8 or 9 matches last year, I think they were arguably the top club in the CPL just for the style of play that they were able to execute. So they have all of those players coming back, but now with one more year experience. Like if you think about Dan Nimick, like he was voted a Defender of the Year, and that was his first professional season, right? Like I am incredibly excited to see what the likes of himself and Caligari, Kale Lockery, Zachary Fernandez are able to put together over this campaign, because I know they looked good in preseason. And just from some of the conversations I've had with people across the league, be they executives, players, agents, a lot of people have marked Halifax to kind of come up and win the regular season. If no other reason than their consistency, but also their depth. They're built very similar to Cavalry, I think, in that they are built with depth. Versus Atletico Ottawa, if they have 1 or 2 injuries or things aren't jiving the way they hope things will, I think, as you said, Thomas, there could be a skid or two in their regular season, and I expect it to be a fight between the Wanderers and Cavalry, with the Wanderers emerging on top.
Wow. Well, I mean, imagine my shock that you chose.
Yeah, I know. I swear I'm objective.
Yeah. No, but I mean, you make some great points. The fact that Geyser Ball was so good in year 1. Imagine what it could be, what it's capable of in year 2, and a huge thing for Halifax. They haven't had another huge turnaround. You've kept a lot of the same core. You've added some pieces in that you maybe were lacking a little bit last season, and it feels like you've elevated the floor and the ceiling of your squad, which is something that a few squads have done, but especially with yourselves, with Halifax. It just feels like, speaking to Patrice the few times that I have, he's someone that you just feel like comfortable around knowing that he is there for football, for playing beautiful football, for wanting to get the best out of you, the best out of his team. You don't, he's not a very political guy. He's very straightforward and honest, and I can see why he has the effect that he has on his players. I think the biggest thing for me will be the away form for Halifax. That was something that was a pretty big struggle for Halifax. If you guys, because I know Wanderers grounds can be a fortress, but if you guys can get a decent away form, then yeah, you can be fighting up there at the very top with the likes of Ottawa's and Cavalry, and you never know what might come out of Halifax for the coming season.
Yeah.
But
There's
moving, yeah,
I was just going to say there's a reason the matches are played on the pitch, right? We can speculate, but until Halifax, as you said, proves that they can win away, it'll be just that, a prediction, right? So again, I'm so excited for kickoff in 8 days now. So
yeah, no, it's the season couldn't come sooner enough, and the season's going to be culminating at the very end with the CPL playoffs. One team is going to be lifting the North Star Cup, and now it is our job to try to predict who that team may be. I'm going to start us off with Thomas. For you, who do you see lifting up the North Star Cup come the end of the season?
So I see Ottawa doing it, and I feel like by the end of the season, things will have been sorted out there. I think they can really get something going by the end of the year. And I mean, we talk about Halifax having that home field advantage, which is right there, and I'm not denying that at all. But Ottawa, too, they're it might not always show for it as it did a couple seasons ago when they won the regular season, but their home form is good. Their fans do push them on, and I also think that if this was just a single elimination tournament like it has been in the past with the playoffs, it then that would be another hurdle for Ottawa, because I feel like there's going to be some any given day moments with them where there's just like one little slip up and then they're trailing by a goal, maybe two. But given that there's that the 1-2 game, if you lose you still have another chance. I think maybe that could be Ottawa this season, and then they just go on, win the 1v2 or 1v2. Sorry, wait, hold on. The 1 or 2v3, 4 or 5. The format's still crazy to me. And then go on and take it. And I do think that there's a hunger in this team to get the business done. So that's why I feel like I have to go for Ottawa to get at least one of the trophies this season.
Fair shouts, fair shouts. I mean, it's sort of expected at this point that they have to come away with something this year. They can't, bring all of these stars in, all of these wonderful names, and have the superstar team that's leaving many people thinking that, they're gonna that if they have the CPL's first super team, it would be tragic for Ottawa and for Carlos Gonzalez if they come away from the season with absolutely no silverware. Josh, for yourself, do you think that Halifax are going to do the double, or do you have somebody else that is going to be the playoff winner?
yeah, I actually had somebody else. Surprise. I picked Cavalry to win the North Star Cup, and again, just from my conversation earlier in the week with Tommy, they're looking to shine in those big moments. They got a taste of it with Champions Cup, and I think that's an experience that they've really learned from, in addition to losing out to Forge last year. So I think they'll come in hungrier than ever and have a real shot at least playing in the final, right? They'll be one of the top 1 or 2 teams, I think. So yeah, my money's on them. Who knows? Forge can always surprise. It's hard to rule them out. Bobby is Bobby, and his total football philosophy is taking that club really far. 4 out of 5 championships. But I think this is Cavalry's time to add another trophy to their trophy case.
Yeah, I mean, another great shout. That'd be huge for Calgary, and Tommy Wilden Jr. to be able to add the North Star Cup, and it would be sweet revenge if they're able to do it against Forge in their own home ground. Maybe have the tables turned and have a little bit of revenge, not only for the final but also the first round, where Cavalry lost at home, to be able to get that win and maybe knock Forge out before the final. You never know how the tables might go. But for myself, this one was a tough one. It was to such a point that I actually did a mock playoff thing where like I put what my predictions were for all of the teams in the places, and then I did a little mock playoff draft to see who do I genuinely think will make it to the final and win. And I did it 3 different times. And the one that spoke the most to me, this is how serious I take it, guys. This is how serious I take these predictions. The one that spoke most to me was actually Halifax Wanderers. And the biggest thing for me with Halifax Wanderers is that I think they will win if they get the home field advantage. I think if they get the home field advantage, either by finishing third or finishing first, even, I think you are not third, fourth. I think it is in the bind. Yeah, or the loser of the 1-2. If you get the home field advantage, maybe even for the final, which would be incredible to see the CPL final at the Wanderers grounds in Halifax, I think you have the ability. The team has the ability, and across 90 minutes, not thinking about how long the season is, assuming everyone is healthy and there's no major injuries, across 90 minutes, I think Halifax at home could beat anyone. And so you could knock out a major player like Ottawa or Forge or Cavalry and be able to go all the way until the very end to lift the North Star Cup. So that one was the one that spoke the most to me out of my sort of mock-up predictions. And I'm sure, Josh, you're quite content with with that prediction there. But some solid ones all around. We're going to be moving on now to the other side of the table. We're talking about the top one at the league, the playoff winner, and at the very bottom we have those playing the wooden spoons. It's not always nice to be at the bottom, but somebody has to be at the end of the year. And so I'm curious to see if we have a trend between the three of us, or if we have 3 different answers. Josh, we'll start with you. For yourself, the wooden spoon, who's going to finish bottom of the table at the end of the 2024 season?
Yeah, I think we all have a pretty similar club in mind. A couple of weeks ago, again, I canvassed people across the league just to have conversations. And I was a bit surprised, actually, because a lot of people did not rate Vancouver's coaching. Everyone loves their recruitment, but really has some reservations of what they're going to be able to do tactically. But for myself, I think it's got to be Valor. It's not that I doubt Philip Dos Santos. I think he's a good coach, actually, and he's doing the best he can with what he's been given. But, they've got a very difficult schedule in so much as I don't think their first home match is until June 2nd. So that's going to be a lot of travel, a lot of heavy road days where you're going to be going into other people's stadiums and trying to steal points from them. And especially when you consider the turnover that they had last season, I think they ended up losing 17 or 18 players from last year's squad. That takes time, and they don't have it. Some people have told me that they worry that Valor could be dead in the water with only a handful of points by the time they make it to their first home match, which of course could influence the amount of people who are showing up to cheer for them. So I certainly hope that's not the case. I think the league needs Valor to be strong, and I do rate some of their additions as well. But for myself, I think they might have the wooden spoon 2 years in a row.
Yeah, no, I mean, some really great points there, and you're right in that I think we might have a trend here, because it's exactly my thoughts as well. I also put Valor at the bottom. That opening away run is going to be brutal for them, especially how strong all of the other teams have recruited, and the fact that they're going to have home games to sort of build momentum, build confidence. To have, Valor be constantly on the road, having to forge those connections, in airplanes through connection flights, having the post match tactical sessions in the 747. It's going to be tough for Valor. And as much as same as yourself, I do rate Phil Dos Santos, and I do like the strategy that they've done for their recruitment. Going a lot more local rather than getting international players that maybe don't know all that much about the league, and players that have proven themselves to varying degrees in the CPL. I think is smart, but yeah, to go all the way until I believe it's June 2nd without a single home match is going to be, I think, too tall of a task for Phil Dos Santos to be able to recover from. And but you never know, they might pull a York United from last season and have an incredible away form. And we might be here looking to fool, but I think on paper, yeah, they're probably the ones destined to be at the bottom. Thomas, are we going to make it a three-peat with Valor, or do you have a surprise wooden spoon?
No, I have to make it a three-peat, and I'm really sorry, Winnipeg, but when I look at the CPL, I see 7 playoff caliber teams, and Valor's the one exception, I feel. Because when I look at them, it's just kind of a ragtag group of guys that have come together because of sort of far off connections with the coach or the city, like a guy like Sean Hundal, which is an amazing signing, by the way. Like, he used to be at Valor and he knows Phil Dos Santos. So, as you guys have both said, there have been some strong moves, and I think their top offseason target was Taz Mordekaitis, who is an incredible center back. I think he really is underrated as one of the better center backs in the league for the last couple of years with York. And he's very durable, as we have seen with a lot of players in this team. But for me, I was kind of, a few months ago, I was kind of on the fence about them. I was looking at their transfers. I was seeing, they're kind of doing something good here. They brought back Dante Campbell, who's a great midfielder. Eventually, they brought back Kean Williams, who's a really great winger. But when I saw out of the blue that Ryan Yesley was going to Ottawa, I think for me, that's when all the doubts started flooding back, because Yesley was someone who could save you in the heat of the moment. Definitely, probably didn't get his flowers as having a chance for goalkeeper of the year, just because toward the end, Valor was conceding so many goals, and it wasn't a good place for him. So it's, I'm happy for him that he's moved on, as with Debrian. But I don't really see a playoff team forming here. But yeah, some nice players that could have some, nice stats at the end of the year, but I don't really see it coming all together.
Yeah, there's something you touched on there, Thomas, that I think's really important. Like, I liked a lot of their signings, and I think there are a lot of underrated players. They're all in that same catchment of being good footballers, but not necessarily the stars on the clubs they've been on previously, whether that be in the CPL or otherwise. And I wonder if there's an element of Moneyball going on with Valor. Players who, for whatever reason, might not be rated as highly as they deserve. Again, using the example of Sean Hundal, right? As soon as Waro Diaz came in, they stripped him of the number 9 shirt, and he didn't get the same amount of minutes that he was getting prior to that, right? So I wonder if they've kind of bet on, okay, here's a bunch of players under the radar, and we'll use our limited budget, because I think it's fair to say that they don't have the same amount of resources, for example, as Atletico Ottawa or maybe a Forge, and they're banking on trying to hit some of these out of the park for low risk, high reward.
Yeah, no, it's true. Yeah. Go ahead, Thomas.
I was just gonna say, if they are doing a Moneyball thing, I think we seriously have to consider which actor is going to play Phil Dos Santos. Very specific personality. I can't really see Brad Pitt going bald for the role of Phil Dos Santos, but you never know.
Mm-mm.
So we might have to consider that. If they have a good season, we're going to have to really seriously consider that.
Jonah Hill might go bald.
Who?
Jonah Hill.
Oh,
I,
Jonah Hill might go bald.
yeah,
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 I can see him doing
I
that.
could see him wearing a bald cap.
Yeah, for sure. That'd be a fun twist. But yeah, unfortunately for all the Valor fans and the people of Winnipeg, we do have Valor as a clean sweep on the win spoon, but we are all hoping to be proven wrong this season. I mean, hopefully not at the cost of the personal teams, but still, we're always happy to be see an underdog story succeed. Moving now back to the happier side of things, we're going to go into some of the awards that we're going to see at the end of the season, starting off with a big one again: Player of the Year, the MVP of the season. Uh, Last year it was obviously Dan Klump who did a double with the Defender of the Year, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But will it be him who will raise it again at the end of the 2024 season? That remains to be seen. But for predictions, starting with myself, I actually went for this one. Is I think a more popular shout, but maybe it's a wishful thinking from myself because how much of I love this player. But I went Baloo Tabla as potential MVP. I think that he is exactly what Atletico Ottawa were crying for last season. Some more, dynamism, some more threat in the attack. Somebody to support both Ali Bassett and Sam Salter. Somebody that can turn a game on its head, and he was so good at that a few seasons ago. And now he's come back, and I feel like he's coming into a squad that he can raise, despite all the other stars, he can really raise the profile of them by himself. That's how special a player he is. And I feel like if Ottawa go to a playoff final, or if they finish in the top two spots in the regular season, and he has a huge part to say in that, then there's no reason why he can't win the MVP award at the end of the season. But when we're moving on to Thomas. Thomas, do you have somebody from Ottawa as well, or do you have somebody from a different team across the league?
So Ottawa's about like 5 or 6 MVP contenders. So I feel like some of them are gonna. It's almost gonna be like a cannibalistic thing where like they all outdo each other, and then ultimately like no one
Mm.
like stands out in a way because MVP has to stand out. Last year my vote was for Ali Musi, but I have a different attacker in mind. I'm gonna go with Aiden Daniels from Halifax. I think he was, or sorry, in my opinion, he was one of my favorite players to watch last year. Like he is an electrifying player, and I think another year under Geyser will do him so much good. And I think again, criminally underrated. But him and Massimo Farron in that attacking like three, like right behind the striker, I really liked that last year, and I could easily see Farron going and taking it because he had like 8 goals. But I think we might see a more statistical jump from Aiden Daniels this season, if anyone. And yeah, just an amazing talent on the touchline, uh, all around the field. He really has a high work rate, and at times can be the lifeblood of Halifax attack. He can be moved over into the middle, and yeah, that's my pick.
Great shout. Josh is nodding his head. Another happy pick there. I mean, you can talk about Aiden Daniels for a little bit if you want before moving on to your MVP pick, but do you agree with Thomas's points there?
Yeah, Aiden Daniels is just such a technically gifted player. I mean, he oozes skill, and the fact that his first season with the Wanderers was a bit of a flop, really disappointed people here. 2023 was a completely different story. He was a different player, and I think to your point, Thomas, you're going to see him get a lot more assists with a true number 9 in Christian
Mm-hmm.
Valesky. Last year, the Wanderers rolled the dice a little bit by having sort of a youth movement with their strikers, Kosi and Farso. He was mutually released by the club within the first 6 or 7 matches, if I remember correctly. And then of course, it didn't quite work out for um, Theo Colom. He was young, 23, and although he got a couple of goals, he couldn't really find his groove. And then Coimbra looked like he was going to take the starting position, and then he hurt himself. So, I think Daniels is a great shout, but not who I picked. Uh, to pivot a little bit, I had a really hard time with this, and even saying it out loud, I continue to struggle. I think it's going to be up between Ollie Bassett. He's been so good for so long in the nation's capital. Oftentimes it felt like he was kind of a little water bug all by himself out there, maybe without the support that he deserved. I think
Mm.
with the star studded cast, you're going to see his potential just completely unlocked, and he's going to have so much freedom to be able to go around the pitch. But at the same time, I also watch Lorenzo Caligari on a regular basis, and very similar to Aiden Daniels, he's just able to do things that other players aren't able to do on the pitch. He's got a skill set and a vision that is truly special, and I think is beyond the CPL. He could easily go play in Europe for a number of different clubs, and I expect them to after this season. So I'm going to cop out, and I'm going to say it's a tie between Bassett and Caligari, and we'll see how things shake out over the course of the season.
Is it okay if I
Two
just
fantastic picks. Go ahead, Thomas.
I was just want to jump in here. One of my worries about Halifax and Caligari is I feel like I don't know. There was a lot of rumors about Caligari and Nimick potentially going overseas, but they renewed their contracts, and I have a feeling that one of them, or at least a big piece of Halifax, might go in the summer, because I think if both of them have very good April to June or July, I think, especially for Caligari, just with his French passport, that the European teams might take a much more serious look at him. And as well, that's also just one of my reasons why I didn't have Halifax as regular season champions, just because I feel like this might be the year when one of the pieces goes. But I don't see that being Aiden Daniels necessarily. I think Caligari is a serious contender. So anyway, yeah, go ahead, Felipe.
No, yeah, Josh, do you wanna comment on that?
I think that's a fair point, Thomas. I know for a fact that the Wanderers did everything under the sun to try and get all these players back, right? I of course reported that Zachary Fernandez, had a move that fell through. I know of at least one other Wanderers player as well who had an offer to go overseas, and for whatever reason, it didn't really pan out. So yeah, to your point, I can see at least one name being sold in the summer. Make them an offer that they can't refuse type situation. Who that is remains to be seen, but that's a fair shout.
Yeah. No, and I think that going on to what you were talking about, Josh, about the two, I mean, Ollie Bassett's a solid choice. I think people forget, because of all of the other stars coming into Ottawa, that Ottawa have already had an MVP candidate. I mean, they had the Golden Boot winner and the MVP winner of 2022 and Ollie Bassett. And well, what I mentioned with Baloo Tabla and a bunch of other players that have come in Ottawa, Amir Didic being one of them, Manny Aparicio being another, so many stars, but Ollie's been there the longest. Ollie knows how Carlos Gonzalez works. Ollie knows what the Ottawa team is with and without these stars. And I think if they go on and have success, well, I'm sure a lot of these other stars will be contributing factors. It'll all rely on Ollie Bassett, and Ollywood, and I think he might be crucial for them if they do have success. And I mean, Lorenzo Caligari, what a player! Oh my lord! You talk about players that you love to watch, and as a player myself, not at his level, I wish, but in amateur football, I'm a defensive midfielder, and to be able to see a defensive midfielder like Lorenzo Caligari, who genuinely he floats, he waltzes through that pitch. If you were to pair Lorenzo Caligari with something, it'd be with a fine wine and smelly cheese. And I mean, Micah said he's just a sexy player, and it's a perfect way to describe it. The way that he plays, I think he would be a fantastic shout if he makes it to the end of the season. Because, like Thomas said, with the French passport and everything, and because he did so well last season, if he pushes on to even greater heights this season, which we know he's more than well capable of, then we might not see him stay for the full season. But I certainly hope we do, so we can continue to see him play for the Wanderers. But now we'll move on to the Golden Boot Award. Last year, it was a tie between Ollie Bassett and Meyer Bevan, are we going to see another tie this year? Maybe two-way, maybe three-way, or is it going to be an outright winner? We're going to start once again with Thomas. For you, your Golden Boot winner, who do you think is going to score the most goals in the 2024 Canadian Premier League season?
Well, I think it's a total toss-up. Again, last year, we had the tie, and I think Taron Campbell was like only one behind those guys. And I think Woobens Pacius was like two. So it was like really tight at the top. But I'm going to go for a bit of a curveball here. And this player is from Ottawa. So you might think, oh, it's probably one of the superstars. I'm going to go with Sam Salter. And look, he struggled last year because he could not get the ball. Because people just, the talent down the wings, it wasn't there. But if I look at this team's winger situation now, you got DeBrienne, Balutabla, you got Chris Twardek on the other side, Sissoko. Like, these are, not even to mention Bassett and Aparicio, who are more shooters themselves, but, that...
Don't forget your Kevin Dos Santos.
And, of course, Kevin Dos Santos, who, again, another very ball-dominant player, so we might see him taking more shots, but I just think the distribution on this Ottawa team can be next level. 2 years ago, Sam Salter scored 11 goals for 7th place Halifax Wanderers. A lot were penalties, and he slowed down toward the end of the season, but I think that he does have a scoring touch in him. I still think that's there, and I think we could see maybe like an Erling Haaland type of season, the season ago, where they give him the ball all the time. He just finishes it off a lot, and so it's a bit of a weird one to pick anyone from Ottawa to win the Golden Boot. I don't think most people would say Sam Salter, but I'm taking a gamble. I'll go for Salter.
Rogue pick. I like it. Josh, for yourself, I mean, you've seen Sam Salter, and you know what he's capable of. Do you have a rogue pick like Sam yourself, or do you have somebody that maybe is a little bit more expected to win the Golden Boot next year?
Thomas literally stole the words out of my mouth. I wrote down Sam Salter as well for very similar reasons. Yeah, man.
Great minds think alike.
Yes,
That's
sir.
amazing.
Yes, sir. It's so easy because he's already had 2 seasons in the league or whatever. But Sam Salter's only 23 years old, and he's just going to get better. And in a lost campaign for Halifax in 2022, he was the bright spot, as it were, and ended up with 11 goals that season. Last year, as you mentioned, Thomas, he didn't have any service. To me, it wasn't a Sam Salter problem. It was an Atletico Ottawa system problem. And I think they fixed that. They paid a transfer fee for this player for a reason. It's because they think he could be a deadly goal scorer. And I think they've put the pieces around him for him to win his first Golden Boot. So, yeah, man, exact same mindset as yourself.
Wow. I'll be honest. I did not expect to have both of you choosing Sam Salter out of all of the strikers in the CPL. But, great. Fantastic. I love those shouts. I completely agree with you guys. Me and Mike have always said that Sam Salter struggled because of the system that he was playing in. And it's something that I think a few strikers in the league last season suffered from, the same of struggling in a system that might have not really benefited their style of play last season. And to see that Ottawa is, with the signings they're making, they're definitely changing something. They can't play the same way they played last season. So hopefully it benefits Sam Salter, and maybe you guys are right. Maybe you guys have made some stellar predictions there in Sam Salter. That was not what I went for, and now I feel like the odd one out because you guys unintentionally were the same on that one. I also copped out here, like Josh did for Player of the Year, and not just with a 2-way tie, but with a 3-way tie for myself, just because it was so difficult to choose who it might be. I went for a 3-way tie between Moses Dyer of Vancouver FC, Rion Moore of Pacific FC,
whoa, okay,
and Sean Hundal of Valor FC.
Whoa,
I think. No, I'm also batting around some of the maybe lesser knowns, but I think Moses Dyer with Vancouver FC. Guedo Diaz had a little bit of a goal drought last season. I think having some support with Moses Dyer. They're playing with two strikers now, or at least that's what they've been doing in preseason. I think they will be able to complement each other more. And I see Guido Diaz as a little bit more of a creator uh, than a goal scorer, despite him, being known in this league for scoring goals. I think he is a little bit more creative than Dyer, which means that Dyer will be scoring some more of the goals, and I think that they'll be able to produce some really good combinations. Rion Moore, I see it mostly because I don't see who else could score for Pacific, because of Dario Zanata. His goal scoring record isn't that great, and they've lost obviously Isan Ungaro and Gennaro Daniels, Adonais Reed. He's not very much a goal scorer himself, though he does pop up with a couple goals. So I see them heavily relying on the Trinidad and Tobago international striker with Rion Moore to be able to get goals and to be able to compete in this league. I know a lot of people don't have them quite high up in the league as for predictions, and I'll be honest, neither do I. But I think if they are going to push up, it's because of the goals through Rion Moore. And then Sean Hondal, he showed that in a pretty bad, poor Vancouver FC side, he could score goals and when he's in his prime position. And despite the fact that Valor FC are going to be severely struggling to get points, I do feel like 90% of their goals are going to be coming through Sean Hundle. So he might have an Easton Ungaro season with the FC Edmonton from a few years ago where he scores a lot of goals, but his team doesn't actually do all that well. So that's why I went for that three-way tie between Moses Dyer, Rion Moore, and Sean Hondo. I know, a little bit surprising, but I literally sat in front of my screen and I can pick any one of those three. I think any of those three have a good shout. So apologies for being indecisive once again. Moving on now to the Defender of the Year award. This one was, again, as I mentioned before, last season was a double sweep with Dan Klump and Player of the Year. It's going to be Dan Klump again this year to make it back to back. I'm not quite sure. We'll see what Josh has to say, though I have an idea of who you might be choosing for Defender of the Year.
You know what? It's funny. I actually think it's going to be Dan Klump again because, as Thomas already said, Dan Nimick is likely going to be sold before he has the chance to complete the season. So, Cavalry were able to bring so many of their pieces back, and of course Klump was such an integral cog in that machine, and I expect him to do the same thing again, be great defensively, to be able to win his duels, to contribute on set pieces, and I think he's going to be leaned on heavily. Obviously he's a little bit older, and is going to be a leader on that team, especially if Meyer Bevan is out for any length of time. So I'm going to go Klump, because Dan Nimick is likely not going to be available.
Wow, fair enough. I think that's a solid shout, considering the conditional that you made of Dan Nimick not making it through the whole season. I am an optimist. I am hopeful. So I think that Dan Nimick will stay for the entire season. That's what I'm manifesting right now. I do want him to, go into to bigger and better things, but I would love to see another full season of him because he's such a fantastic defender. So I went with Dan Nimick actually for my Defender of the Year. I think that he is going to be able to step up this season to be even better than last season in year 2 of Geyserball, and I see him doing incredible things in his career. And it starts, I think, by getting the Defender of the Year award at the very end. But in case he doesn't, I did have an alternative, a plan B, which was Amir Didic. Which again, that's not a big brain move. It's a very easy one, but considering how much that Atletico Ottawa defense is going to have to rely on him because of sort of how thin they are there and how they have quite a few young players there in the defense, I think it's going to be all on his shoulders to lead that back line, and it's something that he's been used to before at Pacific. So if Ottawa have success, then it's going to be, again, defensively a lot to do with Amir Didic. So again, not that surprising picks. Thomas, do you have a surprise shout for us, or are you going to agree with one of us?
So you've got the two Dans, obviously. those are the two big contenders. You got Amir Didic as well. But look, I've gotta pick one of my guys. Got to pick someone from York,
Oh, here
and
we go.
I'm gonna go for the big man Oswaldo Leon. And I think a lot of people are not gonna see this one coming. York's defense is going to have to power them through the season. If they want to make the playoffs, I believe they can make the playoffs. And if they're going to do it, it's going to rely on defense. It's a revamped defensive core. You've got the additions of Cordova, Stirring, and of course, Leon. Leon has almost 100 professional appearances in Mexico. He's an imposing figure. He's going to be so tough to get to or to get through. And I feel like with that revamped defense and the lack of a striker, it's going to be a question of can York's defense sustain the pressure that they'll get from a team like Ottawa offensively, and Leon's going to be at the heart of that. I could even see him maybe contributing to a couple goals too, but if he does get this award, it would be for his defense, and I think he really has it. He can also help bring up one of the best young players in the league, Noah Abatne, at the same time. So yeah, that's I'm going for Oswaldo. He's a great character off the pitch too. Really funny guy. So one of the big acquisitions for York this offseason, and I think it's going to pay off.
Nice. Well, yeah, surprise shot there, though. I guess coming from you, maybe not that surprising. But I'll be honest, I don't know. I didn't know all that much of Oswaldo Leon before. I saw him a little bit in preseason, and he seems like you mentioned, he's a big guy. He's an imposing figure, and yeah, I think you're right in that York United will definitely need to rely on its defense to get it across the line in some of the stages throughout the season. Um, but I mean, you look at the choices that we've made, and I think even with Leon, I don't know if you can see maybe many other contenders, though we might be taken by surprise by somebody coming through. I mean, Noah Badney, you mentioned him, and he's somebody that I look towards as somebody has bags of potential as a defender. Another one, Tier Walker for Ottawa is another one that I think could have a great season. But I think those were some pretty solid shouts for the Defender of the Year. Now moving even more backwards into between the goalposts. We're going to be talking about the Golden Glove Award. Who's going to be the best goalie for 2024? 2023 saw Tristan Henry lifted. Something tells me we're not going to see him lifted again this season, barring some incredible turnaround in events, but we won't dabble in that too much. So it's probably going to be somebody else who's going to be lifting the Golden Glove. I believe it is Josh's turn to start. Josh, who do you have as the Golden Glove winner for 2024?
All of us really rate Cavalry, and so I don't think it should be surprising that potentially one of the best structured clubs in the league also has the Golden Glove winner. So I'm going to go for Marco Carducci. Of course, he is so solid in the back. He can help with their build-up. He's good with both his feet. I can see him earning himself another Golden Glove. On the flip side, as maybe a bit of a dark horse, of course, just talking to people around the league, people really like Christopher Colongo in Forge. Of course, he played the Champions Cup matches, and I'm not saying he's necessarily going to win the Golden Glove, but I wouldn't be surprised if he starts making some waves in the keeper sphere this year, just because again he is so young. He's only 22 years old, but Carducci for the award, but Colongo for maybe a dark horse to get people chattering about the league.
Nice. Carducci, definitely expected, but Colongo is a nice shot there too. I was impressed with his showing in the Champions Cup, and if he is the one that Bobby's going to choose moving forward as the starting goalkeeper, he has some pretty big shoes to fill with Tristan Henry, but if he rises up to it, then yeah, he can definitely be in that conversation.
Yeah, I was going to say I expect it to be a rotation between him and the other keeper they just signed, uh,
Coiliat, I think it's Coiliat.
Kalasat.
Yeah,
Kalasat, I think is how it's pronounced. But so he's 24 years old and he's coming from the LAFC 2 system. So I expect they'll have a bit of a partnership until someone steals the job. But as mentioned, they have history with Colongo and again opted to give him the Champions Cup start, even though Kalasat was there signed to a short-term contract. So it'll be interesting to see what happens over the next couple of months because it's a bit of the Wild West over at Forge for the first time in what seems like a long time. But yeah, going to be fun to see.
Yeah, no, very much so. And I mean, for myself, I went for the pick that I chose originally for last year's Golden Glove. Well, a lot of people had it between Carducci and Tristan Henry. I actually went for Ryan Yesley from Valor, now with Ottawa. I think in a similar vein to what you said with Forge and Colongo, he has competition. He obviously has Nate Ingham, who was a great keeper for them, and is somebody that I don't see being deposed very easily. But I think Ryan Yesley is a young goalkeeper. He's shown last season that when in terms of reflexes, in terms of actually shot stopping, he's one of the best in the league. And I think that he's a couple of mistakes in him, but you can iron those out quite quickly. And to have Nate Ingham be your sort of mentor in that club is going, and also a challenger, somebody that's going to push you, will be huge for him. So I went with Ryan Yesley having the Golden Glove. I think that if he does usurp Nate Ingham as a starting goalkeeper and helps Ottawa go to the reaches where a lot of people are expecting them to go, then I think that he has a good shout at being a Golden Glove winner. Thomas, for yourself, I don't know if you have one, either Yesley or Carducci. I think those are more of the favorites. Or if you have another rogue shout, maybe also coming from York. This is for the coming 2024 season.
I think I first need to acknowledge that last year I tabbed Emil Gazba Golden Glove, and that did not turn out as well as I would have. I thought that he was going to be like the next big thing in the CPL, but he was solid at times at least, but definitely did not come close to Golden Glove. Yeah, I'm going with Carducci. I think just the biggest thing you can say about him is Cavalry went to far distances to get a goalkeeper on loan from Everton, which Premier League team, championship quality, but Premier League team, Premier League organization.
What a day!
Wow.
And Carducci's still going to get like 99% of the starts, and I think that's the best thing you can say about him. He's always been there, and he will be for a while. He's just the backbone of this team of Cavalry, and just so good consistently. I think Jan Filion's really going to make a case this year. I think last season he was very solid, but there were still some kinks to work out in his game. And I think after another off season, having two goalies pushing him, I think he'll definitely have a bit of an uptick in form. But I have to go with Carducci for what would be a record third Gold Glove, I believe, in the CPL.
Yeah, it would be.
Yeah.
It would be.
And I'm so happy you mentioned Jan Filion. I thought about mentioning him as well, but didn't want to be called a homer. But he's someone who is really motivated because I think he's got a bit of a chip on his shoulder from last year for maybe not getting the flowers that he deserved. Right, he played every minute between the sticks for the Wanderers, and it wasn't until the very end of the season that he made the team of the week. And he's a competitive guy, and that stuck with him. So I know he came into training camp this year extremely motivated to kind of show, hey, I am a big player in this league, and I deserve respect. So I'm glad you mentioned that, Thomas.
Yeah. He's no, and I think that it's true that he was sort of underrated. I think there were some spotlights about some of the mistakes that he made. But I mean, a bunch of keepers made mistakes. Tristan Henry made a few mistakes, and he still came out and won the Golden Glove. So it's something that you can't really put against a goalkeeper too much. And I think that Jan Fillion has a lot to prove. And if he's as motivated as you're saying, Josh, then yeah, he can definitely be in that conversation. Especially if Halifax do surprise many people and go all the way until the end of the season, or maybe in the playoffs. So we'll see who lifts the Golden Glove then. But moving on to what I dubbed the Golden Baby Bottle Award, the Under 21 Player of the Year. This is probably my favorite award out of all of them. I love watching young players break through, really get comfortable in the league and showcase that raw talent that they have. So this one was very fun. Last season, Matteo Debrien rightfully won the Under 21 Player of the Year. Such an exciting player. I've loved watching him play for Valor. I think he's going to be tremendous for Atletico Ottawa in this upcoming season. But I'm going to start with this one for myself. This one was tough. I actually had to go through all of the teams and remember who is actually under 21, who fits the criteria, which is those born after January 1st, 2003. And I actually went with two choices. I couldn't decide between the two of them. One of them is a conditional, to be fair. One of them is a conditional because it just came out today that a big French side is looking at potentially signing him, and that's in Kevon Tavernier. What we were able to see of him, in the Champions Cup, and for those that watched, the Canadian men's under 17, the Canadian men's under 20, will know that he is a serious player. He has a lot of talent on him. He has some pretty high potential. In the episode where I talked with, Bobby Smirniotis, he had a lot of time for Kevon. He thinks that he can go to the very top. The world is his oyster. So I think he could, if he steps up for Forge, that I think this season, we talked about Kalongo, Kevon as well. They have a couple of players, young players, that I think they'll need to rely on stepping up because of some of the big players that have left and they might have not necessarily replaced this offseason. I think he has a good shot to be able to shine in this season if he stays. If he does not, then I actually went for another Forge player. Kwasi Poku was the player that I went for. I think that he's shown in the last couple of seasons how great of a player he really is, and he's really grown into the Forge side, and he's really stepped up to the plate for them, and he's shown that he can play anywhere along that left side, whether it be left back, left wing. He is somebody that's similar to Matteo Debrien, is just pure dynamism, pure energy. He can run up and down. He's got that Energizer Bunny engine in him, and he's someone that I love to watch play. And I think he could have, in the same vein as Kevon Tavernier, a huge season because of how much Forge will likely rely on him to perform, given that they don't have many options aside from him in that team and in those positions. So that's why I went for Kwasi Poku. Thomas, going to you as I guess in the media world, you are the one that's holding the Golden Baby Bottle Award. Who have you gone for the Under 21 Player of the Year?
I think I think I need to say it's a really interesting kind of crop of contenders this year, because you've got some really young guys. You're still teenagers. Then you do have some like 21-year-olds like Kwasi Poku. And I also want to thank AS Monaco for throwing a huge wrench in my plans. I was definitely going to pick Tavernier after what we saw in the Champions Cup. But you know what? I'm going to go for someone who is only a year older for him. I want TJ Tahid. I'm taking TJ Tahid for this award. I think he's going to win it multiple times in his career. Look, he's 17 now. He went on trial at Feyenoord Rotterdam, which was huge for him. This guy scored 3 goals last year, and I remember it was like robbed of another goal because someone like tapped it in as it was crossing the line. But I think he's going to score a lot this year in this Vancouver team, because I do think he starts. I was talking with Ashton Gotby yesterday about the youth movement. They've got Grady McDonald now. They've got an 18-year-old, one of their assistant coaches. And TJ's very much at the center of the team this year. In that attacking midfielder position, sometimes even, I think, second striker or a winger, he can play. Either way, you can count that he is going to be stuck in from minute one. He does not look like a 17-year-old. He is very much for pro soccer. And I think, he's got a reputation. He's got a reputation as a young star that's really living up to the hype. And I think we could see him get 5, 6, maybe even 7 goals this season. I do see him being a big contributor, especially as Felipe mentioned, Alejandro Diaz, if he is still kind of regressing to the mean a bit more, then TJ's going to have to step up, and he's more than capable of doing that. I love how Ashton Gopi empowers the very young players, and he might have to duke it out a bit with James Cameron for that award, but maybe even Grady McDonald. But I've got to give it to TJ.
Fair shout. I mean, as someone that has seen TJ play up close and covering Vancouver FC, he is somebody that is wise ahead of their years. He's somebody that he's very down to earth. He's a player that puts his head down and he just does the work that is needed. He works hard. He doesn't have an ego on him. He's very humble and he respects the people around him. You could, not to diss your generation, Thomas, but a lot of young players and young people might like to think themselves, oh, I'm as good as these players. I'm good, like mentally and everywhere. They have the attitude where they think themselves adults. But I see TJ as somebody that doesn't think himself an adult. He just treats himself as, okay, I'm with these players and I have to rise to those level. This is not about me thinking that I'm better than anyone. This is me thinking that I have to learn. I have to put the work in. And he's someone that is already at 17, a role model, which is incredible to say. So I think it's a fantastic shout for TJ Tahid. I think that there's a lot of competition in this Vancouver squad across all positions. But obviously, with him being under 21 and them needing under 21 minutes, he will certainly play. And I think he can make good on his playing time and maybe, score a few more goals than we saw last season. And definitely in that conversation. Josh, have you gone for one of these young players that we've chosen, or do you have a surprise third pick as well?
You guys have all named my picks already. I because of the caveat with AS Monaco, I also had Kevin Tavernier marked as a player to watch who could potentially win this award, but we'll have to see if he makes it. I do know I had a conversation today. Forge wants him back desperately and would sign him to the exceptional young talent contract. But he has to be available, right? As of right now, he's free to sign with whoever. So we'll see if he lands in Europe or not. But if he does, good luck to him. On the flip side, I really couldn't decide between the crop of young players at Vancouver. I had TJ Tahid and James Cameron both neck and neck, as it were. So we'll see where they shake out. But for both of them, they trialed overseas this off season, and I think both are going to get a lot of reps this year. So may the best player win.
Yeah, no, James Cameron I think is someone that he was in the shot for under 21 Player of the Year, but he could have been. Obviously, Matteo De Brienne, I think, deserved it, but he could have easily been the winner as well because of his rise. I mean, the story that he had with Vancouver FC, that he came in and was originally a forward. I believe he told me he was a striker, and then he had to be repurposed as a wingback. And the fact that he, was able to step up and perform when a lot of other players that had that opportunity to play for a CPL squad, even though they might not have the quality in the moment, he actually learned and he grew exponentially and managed to become a starter for Vancouver FC. And I don't know how much time he'll have this season again because there's so much competition in every position for Vancouver FC, but he is someone that I think will have a great career ahead of him. And the fact that he has a British passport as well means that he might be looking towards moving to England at some point in his career. So if he manages to win like an award, like another 21 Player of the Year, then that'll make his life a lot easier. But Thomas, you wanted to have one more point on this before we moved on. The floor is yours.
I just have one more thing to say. As the resident watcher of York United, I do feel like I have to give a shout out to Noah Batney from Lazio Academy, signed for York. Ball dominant center back. He's an absolute warrior. I have not seen him put place a tackle wrong, and he's only 19. He's got so much potential. I think he'll be a finalist this year. But also, watch out for Marky Wojciechowski. His season was cut short last year because on June 30th he broke his ankle. But he's recovered from that. He started both the matches in Mexico, I believe, against Tigres and Rayados U23. And really impressed. He was given the ball a lot of time to run with it. And we still haven't necessarily seen his shot, but I think he's going to be a big piece of the York offense, especially as maybe a backup to Mo Bully, or maybe even someone who takes the place of Denis Helenovic on the left wing. And just because Abatne and Wojciechowski are pretty much the only players on York that are U21 that you can have the confidence to put in a starting role, I do think they'll be getting heavy minutes. So that's just one more. If you wanted to place a bet that was a bit out there, then Markey or Noah would be great picks.
Yeah. Yeah, no, like I said before, Noah Batney, I have a lot of time for him. I think he could grow to be a really, really good defender, and I think he could be a great part, maybe a great partnership with Oswaldo Leon in that back line for you guys. So he might have a big year ahead of him as well. But now we'll move on to the second last, the penultimate award that we have, which is for Playmaker of the Year, aka the player with the most assists. We mentioned a little bit about this certain player floating around who might get a lot of assists. I'm going to start off with Thomas on this, though. Who do you have as the player with the most assists, the Playmaker of the Year, come the end of 2024?
Yeah, so I said Aiden Daniels for MVP. I could easily see it being him. There's a lot of great contenders around the league, maybe on Vancouver, some of those guys. I think I will have to give this one to Ollie Bassett. He is just a wizard out there on the field. Some of the passes he can place are so good, and it'll be interesting to see how he and Aparicio kind of play together, because for the first time this offseason, we saw Ottawa, instead of building around Bassett, they went for someone who's going to directly compete with Bassett for his position. How that dynamic will work, I don't know. I could see Aparicio maybe playing a bit more of a defensive role because he is quite good at that. But still, Ollie, if Gonzalez is going to pick one of the two, I think he'll pick Ollie just because he's been there longer. There's definitely a sense of loyalty. He knows the Gonzalez system, the Atleti system, and so I'll go for him. But maybe actually level on assists with my MVP pick, Aiden Daniels.
Solid. Yeah, I mean, you can never back against Ollie Bassett, and we've already sung his praises a couple times throughout this episode, so I won't add too much. But yeah, he's someone that's capable of scoring goals and setting them up, and with some star players on his side that can score a bunch of goals, I'm sure he'll have his pick of the lot for who to assist throughout the season. Josh, for yourself, who do you have as the Playmaker of the Year? Is it a certain Aiden Daniels of the Halifax Wanderers?
I could see it being Daniels, and I could also see Lorenzo Caligari building on last year's assist total. He had 6 last year. Again, with more of an attacking mindset and having a dedicated number 9. Both of those players could rack up a few more. But again, I've got the same pick as Thomas. I picked Ollie Bassett. It's very funny that he's been construed as a goal scorer in the nation's capital, because I think his ability to find seams and little lanes and put balls in dangerous positions is so underrated, especially because, again, it's kind of been a one-man show in a lot of ways on the offensive side. And he's had to put the ball in the back of the net because he wasn't necessarily getting the support from the wings and the wing backs that he would have liked. So I expect him, if Sam Salter is going to win the Golden Boot, Ollie Bass is going to have a lot to do with putting the ball at his foot.
Yeah. Again, it feels like I'm the odd one out there now. But solid shouts there with Ollie Bassett. Yeah, I went for someone a little bit more local to where I am. I went for a Vancouver player that impressed me greatly at the end of last season, and that was Gabby Bitar. I think Gabby
Love
is a
that.
player that is sneakily a potential MVP player just of his ability. He can create goals, he can score goals. He's a little bit like you mentioned, Josh, like Ollie Bassett, and he finds the little gaps and the spaces to kind of wiggle through to break lines and create opportunities. He is someone that's he works hard. He has had the opportunity to go and play for his country in Lebanon and have that experience there too. And I think that when Vancouver FC were good at the end of last season, it was because, they had Gabby Bitar either scoring goals or assisting goals. And he came really strongly at the end of last season. And I don't think it's a coincidence, the form that they had alongside with Gabby Bitar really coming into his own. So I think if he has a full healthy season, he might put up a lot of numbers and assists, especially if I'm correct about Moses Dyer. It could be a little 1-2 there with top goal scorer and top assister with Gabby Bitar. But yeah, that's who I have as my Playmaker of the Year award. Now, moving into the final award in this long episode, we have the Dark Horse slash Biggest Surprise. I was going to keep it just Dark Horse, but Dark Horse is usually something positive. But if you have a surprise shout for maybe a team underperforming or a player underperforming or a coach underperforming, that is obviously open as well. So it's a little bit of a twofer category there, give you guys a little bit more freedom. We are going to have a Josh starting. We're going to have Josh starting for this award. Who do you have as your dark horse slash biggest surprise?
We already talked about him quite a bit, so I'll pick someone else. But as mentioned, I think Sammy Salter could be one of the biggest surprises this year, just in terms of people who fly under the radar and maybe aren't rated as highly as they should be. But I am going to make two Wanderers picks, actually. If Dan Nimick is sold, as a lot of us do expect, Julian Dunn is a player who is at a crossroads in his career. He impressed with Valor a number of years ago, went overseas, and had a terrible injury. And so he's come back to Canada now, trying to rehabilitate his career and get him back on the stage where he thinks he can be. He even talked about in an interview for CanPL.ca about, he feels if he puts together a good season, he could be within reach of potentially getting a call up for the Canadian national team. So he's someone who I think is extremely motivated to prove not only to the league, but also to himself that he's healthy enough and can get back to the heights that he's previously been at. So he's one player. And then the second one is Cale Lockery. I would say that, he fought his way into the lineup last year for Patrice Geyser. And he did quite well, but he was sort of Dan Nimick's silent partner in a lot of ways, right? Everyone was praising Nimick for good reason. But Cale was there throughout, and he doesn't get as much attention just because he's a bit more of the old school bruiser, stay at home, sweeping type defender. But it was on the Coast's Wanderers Grounds podcast where he talked about how he really wants to add some passing to his game and to contribute more offensively. And I know the coaching staff is really looking for him to get involved on set pieces. He's a big guy. He's 6'2" or 6'3". He is good in the air, but just for some reason he hasn't been able to put it all together. And I think that could be something to look out for this year.
Yeah. I love that you mentioned Kale Lowry because he's somebody that I think maybe was a little bit overshadowed with Dan Nimick because of how great Dan Nimick was, but he was just as solid, I think, alongside Dan Nimick, and I think that if he has another huge season alongside him, alongside Dan, then maybe he'll get a lot of the plaudits. And if Dan Nimick does leave, then it sort of becomes his back line, and he'll be the head of it, and he'll have that experience, and he'll have that maturity that he's accrued in the last season and a half alongside Nimick to be able to lead that line. So yeah, great shout there for potential dark horse slash biggest surprise. I'll go next. For me, I am going again a little bit local. I'm just going for Vancouver FC in general because, like you mentioned, Josh, you a lot of people aren't convinced that they're going to do very well, whether that be because of the coaching direction or the tactics, or maybe the players aren't going to gel quick enough, whatever the reason may be. A lot of people are underestimating Vancouver FC, and I think that's actually the best thing for them. I was actually speaking with Afshin yesterday at the event, and he agrees that, you know, not to have that pressure on them is going to make it a lot easier for them to surprise people. When you look at the likes of Ottawa, all the pressure is on them and on Carlos Gonzalez to deliver. And not having that kind of pressure, and especially that it's given that's your second season, is going to make it a little bit easier for them to actually perform. And if they continue their fine form from last season at the end, then I could see them going into the playoff spots, and you never know how far into the playoffs that they may be able to go. They could be a very much a surprise package this season, but it will all depend on whether those players and the coaches, if their values and their styles align. So that is my dark horse for the 2024 CPL season. Thomas, for you, who is your dark horse slash biggest surprise for the upcoming season?
I have just a few things that I just want to rattle off quickly. I think Forge and Pacific both regress a little. I think maybe Pacific falls out of that playoff picture while Forge stays in it. I think if Tristan Borges has a full season of health, that's going to be huge for Forge. Having the wingers of Borges and Baribanga, I think that'll be amazing for them. With Taryn Campbell, obviously, as a striker. Pacific, I see it as a bit flat. I don't know. They play some great football, but I don't think it's necessarily going to be too much of an entertaining team as much as it was last year with your Niger Reed and Kaku Amane, and maybe just some of that magic is lost there. There's just a name from Valor that I want to throw in, just kind of in one of their a million signings this offseason. Temi Antonoglu, I think his name. As some people might know, Canadian Soccer Daily is affiliated with Waking the Red, and so I'm in a couple chats with Waking the Red people, and they were saying that he's actually a pretty good prospect, and they were kind of surprised to see him end up with Valor of all teams. So I think Antonoglu is going to be a name to watch. And I think Felipe said Gabi Pitar, Mikhail Cantave, I think on the other side of Vancouver's offense can also have a similar effect. Just electric player there. I suppose I should throw in someone from York, and I'm going to go with Branzu Mauro, who a lot of people are familiar with. He won Fans Player of the Year last year. He is an incredible player. The way Martin Ash liked to play last season, he kind of had Sumaro staying back, Jeremy Gagnon-Lapierre kind of more joined the offense, and Gagnon-Lapierre ended up with 6 assists last year, and now he's back in Halifax, so that's a big loss. So I do think, as I said, as I alluded to before, with York's defense, Sumaro's going to be a big part of that. And, when he wants to have a go, he comes quite close to the nets. So much so once that he defeated Forge in the 93rd minute, which was still one of the best ones in recent memory. So Brem,
yeah,
not a lot of people will see him, but great player.
Fantastic shot. And I agree also with some of the other points you mentioned of Pacific not making it into the playoffs. Not to have Pacific fans hate me, but I actually see them potentially not making the playoffs at the cost of maybe Vancouver FC. So, but yeah, no, Brem Sumaro, that goal against Forge, what a beautiful goal. That's that. I think at the end of season awards that we did, myself and Mike, I think we put that as goal of the year, just because of how beautiful it was. But we're actually Thomas reminded me in a little chat here that we forgot Coach of the Year. I was so excited by all of the other awards that we forgot about who is going to end up being the best coach in the 2024 CPL season. So we're going to do that real quick. We're going to run through that before we finish up here. We'll just start back up with myself. I think it's going to be Tommy Wilden Jr. I just think that he is such a fantastic coach, and for all the reasons we've described before, as a motivator, as a tactician, as a somebody who's built that club up from the ground, he is such a wonderful human being and also a fantastic coach. So I think he's going to be coach of the year come the end of the season. Thomas, for you, do you have somebody else as your coach of the year?
Yeah, I'm going to take Tommy again if he gets this team to back-to-back shields. Because at the end of the day, these are regular season awards, which we have to remember. So the playoffs don't really matter, even though I believe when the votes go in, there's maybe a week of the playoffs has gone by. I don't entirely remember it, but yeah, I'll take Tommy again. Especially if Cafford is even better than last year, he's for sure getting it.
Fair enough. And Josh, yourself, who is your coach of the year for 2024, do you reckon?
As was mentioned, I think it's whoever ends up lifting the trophy at the end of the regular season. I personally thought it was going to be the Halifax Wanderers, so I'm going to have to go with Patrice Geyser. Having said that, if I'm proven wrong and Cavalry goes on to win their second regular season title in a row, then it'll be Tommy. But, we can't go wrong with either. Both fantastic coaches, great communicators, and solid tacticians.
Fair enough. And that's the end of our season predictions. Thank you so much for listening to this rather long episode. If you made it all the way through, I congratulate you. And I appreciate it very, very much. Thank you so much to both Thomas and Josh for coming out and chatting with myself in the absence of Mike about the upcoming season. I know we're all very, very excited for the beginning of the 2024 CPL season. It can't come fast enough. So it's always great to chat about it and put that energy into something like a video like this. So thank you so much for coming in. I'll give it to Thomas first. Go ahead and let the people know where they can find you, where they can hear you, and plug yourself.
You can find me on Twitter at ThomasHewitt22 and my writing site CanadianSoccerDaily.com and WakingTheRed.com. We've got some CPLs dropping soon, probably early next week. So yeah, watch out for that.
Sounds great. And then going on to Josh, I know you have a long list of things to plug, so I'll let you have the floor now.
Yeah, of course. Just for social media, you can follow me at Josh RJ Healey, Healey. And then I also have a podcast with my friend and colleague Mitchell Bailey. That's the Healey and Bailey Notebook. That's available wherever you find podcasts. I also have my blog, wanderersnotebook.ca, where you can find all my reporting on the CPL. And over the next little bit, you'll also see more bylines for One Soccer.
Amazing. Yeah, definitely go out and support these two and everybody else who's working so hard ahead of the season to bring you as much content and excitement for the 2024 season. Hopefully it's the biggest season yet of the CPL, and we'll all be there watching along eagerly. But for ourselves at Coast to Coast, make sure you follow us once again on all of our socials at Coast to Coast FC, so you can give us your thoughts on this week's episode. What did you think of our predictions? Did you think we had some gems in there? Did you think we have some stinkers in there? We'd love to hear from you guys to see what you think. And if we like any of your comments or tweets, we might get a shout out on the next show. But until next time, I'm Felipe Jeho.
I'm Thomas Hewitt.
And I'm Josh Healey.
And this has been Coast to Coast FC, signing out.